So, it's finally come to this. Believe it or not, this was one of the games that I wanted to cover fucking years ago when I first started this series. I was so angry with it that I wanted to tear it a new asshole. 6, almost 7 years ago. However, the 7-year wait, which is half of this game's development time, massive sarcasm quotes, oddly enough is kind of worth it because I feel like I can distance myself enough not to lose my shit while still being bitter enough to give it the beatdown that it deserves. There are a few video games that I've been disgusted by, frustrated with, and endlessly resentful towards. This game ticks every box for a bad time, and I'm going to show you every moment of that that's worth addressing, as we descend into the rabbit hole, which is actually a rabbit toilet, known as Duke Nukem Forever. Now I know that this game has a long backstory about its development, which you can actually read about in the extras section of the game, but to tell the truth, I'm not planning on going over it in its entirety. Mainly because a number of people already have in depth and detail that I couldn't hope to replicate, and I also honestly couldn't care. You see, my perspective is someone who's never played a Duke Nukem game. I'm not curving my punches out of nostalgia for the good games in this series. This is my introduction to the series as a whole, and I feel like that gives me a bit of an edge. I'm probably not unique in that edge, but it's an edge nonetheless. That and this game's development history is actually boring as shit. 14 years of making builds that were never released until the hacker known as 4chan got a hold of them, and a few squabbles over the rights between a bunch of greedy publishers. That and a bunch of clowns fucked around achieving literally nothing for years, and then passed the buck on to someone else to do it for them, only to take it back so that they could take credit for one of the biggest disasters in gaming history. You know how some train wreck movies and video games are more interesting behind the scenes than what's on screen? I don't feel like this is one of those. Even with Randy Pitchford involved, who insists that this game is great by the way, it's actually not that fascinating of a story overall. I mean, nobody even gets punched, so what's the fucking point? I actually got this as a collector's edition on the PS3 a few years back, and I was hoping to show it off for this video, show you what was in it and whatever, but yeah, because I've moved like twice, I have no idea where it is. I believe it's still at my parents' house, and I actually even broke into my parents' house whilst they were away to try and find it, and I couldn't, so you can't say I'm not dedicated. You can actually see it in the background of my Gnome Games video, so I definitely have it. Anyway, if I ever get a hold of it again, I'll definitely show it off in its own video to anyone who's actually interested. Anyway, enough of this bullshit. Let's dive face first into this pile of shit and kick it off.
In case of emergency, 911 calls him. His ear once bit Mike Tyson. When you open up a can of whoop-ass, he jumps out. He once killed 2 stones with 1 bird. He lives vicariously through himself. He is.
So we get this intro that's incredibly stylish, but it's inept and offers us absolutely nothing. So that's fantastic. Who doesn't love a mediocre start to get us in the right mood? It then ends with Duke ironically nuking himself because he's an idiot. The game begins with a rather disjointed sequence in which Duke is returning the fight to the aliens after kicking them in the dick in Duke Nukem 3D. That's all the story it really gives you, and in all honesty that's all the story you need. The game begins with some wonderful symbolism as Duke pisses away, like how 14 years was pissed away developing this shit.
better.
Anyway, no time for that now. I've got a hand soap dispenser to fuck around with. There are a fair few interactables in the game. Admittedly, they reduce in volume over the course of it, but it's kinda cool having this many things to fuck around with, mostly just for the fun of it. Like, they do nothing else for the game other than you can just push this and it does something. Sadly, most of them do fuck all, and they don't really even change the environment. Like, when you push the soap dispenser, the animation just resets when you press it again, so it's not like you can literally flood the room with hand sanitizer, which would have been kind of funny, but I understand that would have been really hard to do. Anyway, you can have some fun in the bathroom, and can even pick up a turd and throw it around, but I sadly missed the turd in this playthrough. I just kind of forgot it exists. We then find ourselves in a hive of homoeroticism as these soldier boys discuss their plan. A plan that I am more than willing to add my own tactical genius to.
Duke. Oh man, that is... I mean, I don't understand any of it, but I bet if I did, that guy over there would still have his arm. And at least one of his balls.
So after grabbing the BFR, the big fucking ripoff, I ascend into the football stadium to fight the Cycloid Emperor in an epic 1v1 Fortnite Chicken Royale. I might as well throw in a few references of my own to keep it up to date. I'd say I was acing it until about 15 seconds in when I run out of ammo, after which I have to run around for the rest of the fight trying to find more. It really does kind of kill the epic mood vibe that they were going for. Oh, and the ammo count says 69. It's funny because, Anyway, mutually assured destruction turns out to be almost mutually assured destruction. I love it when that happens! In the end, there's only one way to end this.
It's good.
To be fair, this is the best Madden NFL game I've ever played. So after that mediocre but inoffensive opening, the game instantly begins with Duke being sucked off by the Olsen twins. And no, that's not hyperbole. These two characters are literally the Olsen twins with a different name. They dress like high school girls as well, which leads me to believe that someone needs to go into 3D realms with a fucking flamethrower and burn that mother down. Also, it gets pretty damn creepy when you realise that this was written between 1997 and 2011. The creepiness of this also kind of increases when you realise that the girls were between 11 and 21 years old whilst this shit was being written and put in place. Also, as far as portrayals go, I don't think this is fair either. They never really went off the rails like Miley or Britney. Not to mention either that fetishising two child stars who are mostly known for their work as, well, children, is beyond weird and very uncomfortable. Especially when their establishing shot involves them giving a blowjob to a man who's somewhere between 30 and 50 years old.
What about the game, Duke? Was it any good?
Yeah, but after 12 fucking years, it should be.
This is the best joke in the entire game. Because A, the game took 14 years to develop, not 12, and B, they accidentally admitted that they actually farted this thing out in a year or two. Good fucking job. Then they reference Jay Leno, I think? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, this is a game that took 14 years to make, so it could be a reference to any talk show between 1990 and 2011. Any year of which might as well have been the Cretaceous era or something. Especially since I was only really sentient for about, 9 of those 14 years? So, a lot of these references are kind of lost on me in the early stages of the game. This is where the story actually begins, and apparently President Non-Reagan is in talks with the evil alien baddies to establish peace between their two prospering worlds. Right, So it's time to address the elephant in the room because it's starting to stink up the joint. The humour in this thing revolves entirely around pop culture references that alternate between, oh my god dad, stop trying to be cool, new references, and oh shit, that was a thing, and what the fuck is this game talking about, I'm sorry but I'm not quite graying yet so I don't understand, humour.
Alpha team straight up the middle. Blake, flank left. Phillips and I head around. That's step 2. Step 3 is, profit? Right. You ready? 1.
We've got your green power armor over here and ready to go.
Power armor is for pussies.
Update Graves on this shitstorm. You go on ahead and take Private Jenkins with you, since he's the only other poor motherfucker who's crazy enough to go with you.
Damn it, Leroy.
Johnny on the show, and there you are wandering through the set. You never stop to wonder if it might be distracting with you walking through? Do you want me to trash your mics? Would you like me to trash your mics? You don't fucking get it. The scene's done. Now, the rest of the crew left for Duke Burger, and my moment with Johnny is over. Duke, good to fucking see ya. I knew that retirement bullshit was just bullshit. Fuck that retirement shit. I just got back from helping my friend find his wife. Christ, what a fucking pussy.
Every scene in this game seems to be some sort of reference. Scenes just play out as they did in the thing that they're referencing, without a joke or a parody twist added to them. And a fair few times, the devs and writers seem to miss the point of the thing they're referencing entirely. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen here are a classic example of what I mean. They're a reference to something that is so old, I only know about it because the trailers of their final shows were on my Pokemon VHS tapes, and even then they were in the we're too old for this shit phase. Then, 10 years after that point, they reference them in a way that doesn't even make sense. They didn't have a Lindsay Lohan era, and everything that is comparative is just really dumb teen shit that most of us have done at some point or another. I mean, I know that I bought my fair share of $7 million penthouses and then sold them after making out with Jared Leto. The point is, I couldn't tell if this was them trying to predict the future or failing to understand the present. But they failed miserably on both accounts. This isn't the only thing like this either. The game utterly lacks awareness, not just of itself but everything around it. Even in E3 trailers, they had this one video where Claptrap more or less voices every critic who would go on to play this game by saying that the game just doesn't hold up to titles that came out a year before this one.
What? Did you miss me?
Cut! Cut! Are you kidding me? Are you stealing from beer commercials now? Wasn't enough to piss off Bruce Campbell, was it? You just had to go there. Listen, now that you're at Gearbox Software, we've got to get you out there, man. That's why the Suits hired me to do your PR, right? Right. And Duke, babe, can't just be gone for over a dozen years and then think you can come back after all this time and just give us a hi.
You want to bet? Hail to the king, baby.
Ah, there it is again. Duke, look at all the people out there. These people are all with the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. They're not here to see you, Duke. They're here to see Jay Moore. And they decide which video games each year are the best. They're all dressed up tonight because it's the 2011 Interactive Achievement Award Show, an award that you are going to want next year.
I've got plenty of awards.
9,000 Vaporware of the Year awards do not count. Duke, what I'm trying to tell you is, you've got to play ball. You've got to look at what this year's nominees did and be more like them. Take Game of the Year nominee Red Dead Redemption. You've played it, right? Right. Well, it's about the Wild West, family, and personal sacrifice. It's subtle and surprisingly emotional. Do you have anything like that in your game?
You mean like this? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Wow. Okay. Moving on. Next is God of War 3, a game that features giant monsters inspired by Greek mythology and beautiful women with bosoms the size of your ego. You got anything like that, Duke?
Yeah, well, check this.
I'd still hit it.
God, you can't combine monsters and boobs, Duke. Who does that? Anyway, next is Halo Reach. Don't make a reach around joke, okay? Fine. Let's see what you've got for Halo. Roll the footage.
Time to move on.
Duke, we've got your green power armor over here and ready to go.
Power armor is for pussies.
Well, okay. You want a gun instead?
You just don't get it. This is serious business. You can't insult
Shut
one of the greatest science fiction video game
the
series of all time and get away with this.
fuck
Where do you get the nerve to do something like that?
Yeah, that deserves an award.
Welcome to the fourth.
I can't believe I'm taking this annoying robot side on anything, But yeah, apparently driving around a barely textured wasteland in a shitty pickup truck is on par with the entirety of Red Dead Redemption. Most of this game's humour feels like it was written by a 14-year-old boy who thinks that rude and memes and references equal funny. But as far as actual jokes go, and as far as beyond pointing at someone or something and hoping that people will laugh at it because it exists or it reminds them of something goes, yeah, this is a comedic wasteland.
Hey, glad to see you, Duke.
Who are you? Why are you here? Do you know who this jackass is?
Good to see you, Duke.
So one of the early plot points is that the aliens arrive and go to the local burger joint straight after landing, which I find kind of funny. It's the closest thing to a joke that I've come across this far.
Eyewitnesses have confirmed that several aliens have descended from the mothership and are now reportedly in line at the Duke Burger on the Vegas Strip. No hostility has been observed.
Hi there. You're even better looking in person. After the show, I want your autograph somewhere special.
Excuse me, Duke Nukem? Yeah, my kid's a real big fan. Go on and ask him, Jimmy.
Mr. Nukem, will you sign this for me?
Sure, kid. But I better not find this on eBay.
I want to grow up to be just like you.
Take your pills, vitamins, every day, and you might grow up to be as awesome as me.
Wow, thank you, Mr. Nukem.
So the main focus around this game is Duke's ego, which is actually the thing that keeps him alive. This would be funny if Duke was self-aware in any way, but he's not. So in this universe, his ego is well deserved and not a single thing is allowed to happen at his expense. No woman can reject him, nobody on Earth is not a fan, minus the President, who is treated as an idiot because of this, and the entire universe exists to purely suck off Duke's chode. I honestly think it would have been a good twist to this game if Duke finds out that he's actually living in some matrix that just exists to stroke his ego, and that he's basically been living in a docile coma for years. So I'm not going to dissect every reference that I come across, but here's another one that delightfully misses the point. It's years older than this game, and it just really isn't funny. It's Christian Bale yelling at the crew guy.
Are you kidding me? I'm trying to do a scene with Johnny on the show, and there you are wandering through the set. You never stop to wonder if it might be distracting with you walking through? Do you want me to trash your mics? Would you like me to trash your mics? You don't fucking get it. The scene's done. Now,
So, for a start, this happened 2 years before this game came out, and very late into the development cycle. I wouldn't be surprised if they reworked this entire part of the game just to add it. For those of you who might have been spending your time uncutting your umbilical cords to have noticed this and don't have a clue, Christian Bale got angry on set and yelled at a crew member for walking on the set during a filming and fucking up his take. Now, the first issue that I have with this is that this guy is apparently on a chat show and is ranting about that, which is very different to the filming of a movie. Chat shows tend to be a bit more relaxed. They don't take as much effort to do, and they're also a lot less make or break for your career. Most of the time they're just promotion, unless you say something utterly horrendous that gets you into trouble. But in the context of this scene, people kind of expect to see crew guys walking around in the background of chat shows. It's not supposed to happen, but if and when it does, it just kind of gets accepted as whatever. But also, I feel like they missed the point in why any of it happened. Bale was pissed because he was trying to do his job. He's trying to lay out lines that he'd rehearsed, and he's trying to do it in the best way he possibly can. Even with the script in front of me, no two takes I've ever done are exactly the same. It's impossible, and believe me, it's tedious as all fuck to have to re-record a line, despite doing everything right, because someone in the background with no consideration for what you're doing walks in or shouts over it. No, really, that shit is annoying. I handle it better than Christian did here, usually because it's a member of my family and I wouldn't want to speak to them over something so dumb as a YouTube video, like they're a piece of shit, but honestly, I get the irritation of a performance that could make or break your career being sabotaged by some jackass not paying attention to what's going on and wandering in on the set or fucking it up. Like, I don't agree with the way that Bale handled it, but I too totally understand why it happened and why he got pissed off. This game, on the other hand, just doesn't get any of that, so they just make this guy out to be a pretentious asshole douche who just enjoys yelling at people to get himself hard. I.e., they think he's a Randy Pitchford self-insert. I noticed this guy was having an awkward shit, so I went and got him some microwavable popcorn. I didn't microwave it, but it's the thought that counts. So it's at this point in the game that things start to go wrong. In universe, I mean. The game itself went wrong the moment that I pushed the start button. I can't help how this elevator ride is supposed to put things into perspective, but the background looks fake and the aliens climbing the windows look dumb, because they're in an animation loop. So I bring myself to the Duke throne, but there's some douche on it who's waited years to take his picture on it. So it's my job to take that picture, I guess. I don't mind if it makes him happy.
Hey, get lost, pal. The king needs his throne.
No way, man, no way! I'm not leaving until I get my picture on this throne. I've waited years for this. Hey, could you hit that picture button over there? Thanks, man! I can't wait to check my mail!
And so, I descend into the catacombs of Nukem, Earth's first and last defense. This'll be a lark. I do have to ask though, why would you make the entrance of a building of strategic significance to the nation, to Duke himself, and the fucking world, a tourist attraction? What happens if some random jackass accidentally activates it and gets banished to the Duke cave? Or whatever it's called. So the General and the President from Shadow the Hedgehog want a word. Apparently the aliens are coming for peaceful shit and the President don't want me fucking it up. Fine by me. I mean, if I can get along with the Vortigaunts, it shouldn't be too tough. There's actually a line here about Duke being a relic from a different era and how this brashness isn't necessarily what the world needs anymore. And if that wasn't just a throwaway line, I'd honestly like this as the conflict of the game. I honestly think it might have been better if Duke, being an outdated character, would have worked out better for the game's narrative. I believe that Ben Yahtzee Croshaw of Zero Punctuation wrote a script along these lines, and I think it would have worked a lot better. It would have at least been better comparatively. On the other hand, Duke fucking up the peace talks on purpose because he can't let bygones be bygones would also be pretty funny and an interesting plot point. That his ego just doesn't allow him to sit this one out, and they then find out that the aliens were gonna betray the president all along, so Duke feels justified even though he completely fucked up. Again, this would have been another good attempt at making a nuanced plot, but sadly all we get is this weak attempt at political commentary masquerading as a plot. So immediately after the call ends, aliens attack Duke's base. It actually might have been cooler if the president sent people to assassinate Duke, and would have added more depth to the story, But the story sucks shit, so the aliens just attack a guy who wouldn't have interfered anyway because they're stupid. They don't even send their best, just randies who got mowed down by Duke over the course of a week, 12 years ago. So, I run into some aliens who got distracted and started fucking about with the environment. I don't blame them, I do that a lot too. I would have left them alone if they were just working out, but I need to kill them to advance the story. So I tried to advance myself, but found myself getting killed by a hazard that I thought was going to be one of those you run through and it does a little bit of damage but it don't kill you. But it just serves to kill me instead. So I fuck around here for a while and it serves the purpose of boosting my ego. So I guess that's good. I do love how Duke drinking one can of beer makes him instantly drunk. What a fucking lightweight, even I can handle more than that. And I don't even drink. We then get introduced to a mechanic known as Duke Vision, in which Duke can kickstart the night vision mode in his sunglasses. It's stupid, but it fits with the rest of the game, so I'll allow it. Why do all the aliens walk like they've shit themselves? Oh look, they've got the seesaw puzzle from Half-Life 2. They're showing off physics engines 10 years after they were more or less mastered. Oh, well done, Duke. I then encounter this puzzle where you have to fuck around with a remote controlled car in order to get an energy cell out of a storage room and deliver it to yourself. Great. This RC car is disorienting as fuck, as one would expect due to the perspective of the thing, so driving it around is an absolute bitch. I'm thankful that the remote has a flip button, or it would probably result in us being instantly fucked the second that this thing lands on its roof and gets stuck. I like as well how it follows the tracks somewhat up until this point and it just stops as you reach a ledge. And then it just stops following the path and you just drive off the edge of a ledge. Class act game, class act. Anyway, I get the energy cell to the computer and it immediately says something to stroke Duke's ego because of course it does.
You really know how to turn a girl on.
So after punching my way through enemies and having to wrestle a gun from the hands of a deadly alien assassin, the computer finally thinks it's time to give me a handgun. Well gee, that would have been nice like 10 minutes ago. So I fight my way through to get the giant gun and notice two jackass aliens trying to sabotage it. It's at this point that I can't help but notice how lacking in imagination the aliens are in this game. They look like every other alien I've ever shot in a video game, ranging from Area 51 to Doom. Some enemies in this game feel like they were lifted from Doom or something similar. One nice touch that I noticed was that the launch code for this giant gun is 1138. The significance of which was lost on me until I had to look it up. Yes, I had to look up a DNF reference. I'm as fucking flabbergasted as anyone else. Apparently this is a reference to George Lucas's first film, which was titled 1138, and is actually a callback to Duke Nukem 3D, in which you could go into a secret room and find this number on the security monitors. This is by far the most subtle reference in the entire game. Like most shitty FPS games, we end up in a turret section. Yay. I have played worse turret sections, Medal of Honor, and it is at least possible to fail on this one, so I'll give it a pass. One thing that's kind of worthy of note is how much easier this game was to play the second time around. Now it's either because I'm better at video games now, it's not hard to improve on garbage, or this game is a lot better on PC than it is on consoles. Partly because shooters in general are easier with a mouse and keyboard interface, but also the fucking optimization is tons better as well. Load times aren't eternal on the PC version, and the game doesn't chug along on the old ragdoll like I remember the PS3 version doing. This is apparently because Piranha Games had to make the ports quite late on to get more sales, and the actual design was based around the PC versions, with consoles as a sort of afterthought. You'd think that an FPS game of all things would be available on everything, especially one as basic bitch as this. Typically PC versions of games work better all around, unless they're poorly ported, but This one is a few instances where I'd say that I wouldn't even fucking bother with the console ports, due to how long you'll wait for the load time in between inevitable deaths. You could beat the entire game on PC in the amount of time you'll spend waiting for the fucking game to continue on the PS3 or the Xbox. At this point I learned that the middle mouse button is melee. Why? Doesn't help either that scrolling the thing is also the fucking weapon select system. So there's a distinct possibility that you'll change weapon whilst trying to melee people. How many fucking buttons did this game have to work with and they still ended up fucking it up? We then come to, oh fuck off, not this bit. Right, so for this bit you have to use the brakes to stop the elevator from falling. It's a puzzle that revolves around timing and managing your stamina. I fucking despise it. It's one of those things that I managed to do, but don't really even know what the fuck I did that was so right that I passed. It just worked in the end, which thank fuck, because I really was beginning to feel a strong hatred for this entire situation, including the idiot that I'm meant to save.
Oh my god, Duke, thank you. I'll go down with you anytime.
So then I go, tiny? What? I then meet a dumb kid whose mum wants to vaginally or anally vor me. I don't know which, but this is one of many reasons that I think the writers of this game need to be lined up and shot out of necessity.
Tiny? What the hell? I know right where I'd stick him.
Keep your Kentucky Fried fetish away from me!
Anyway, Vorboy gives me access to his RC car, which thankfully has a steering wheel and a driving mechanism built into it, just like a real car, in the event that a tiny person ever needs to drive it. The amount of painstaking work that it must have taken is beyond moronic, but I do appreciate their dedication regardless of how fucking stupid it was. So this is a competent mini vehicle section, which kinda reminds me of the shoe section in Rayman 3. It's decently put together, but it's not really exciting or fun. It just sort of exists, and that neither offends or impresses me. It does have some bullshit leaps of faith sections, but at least failing these doesn't have that much of a consequence, so that's good. We will eventually do this stupid puzzle where you have to use a model to climb things, and then yourself. It'll make sense, eventually. I do like this touch where you can ram a guy's foot in the RC car and he hops around clutching his shin. It's pretty funny. One thing about this part of the game that really stands out is how the perspective is fucked and how there are several points where I crashed into things not knowing whether they were too big or I was too small to drive around or into. We then end up in a tiny shootout. I hate it. It's kind of funny though how Duke's bullets must be the size of ants, and yet they can supposedly kill people still. In the next area we need to raise a gate. To do this we have to hop around a room and climb up something. It's tedious, but at least I have to think somewhat in this segment, which honestly feels like a novelty. I then get attacked by fucking rats! I'll give the game one thing, and that's that trivialities become threats in the course of this game, in a rather decent and thought out way. This aspect of the game is actually quite decently designed, though it does say a lot about Duke and his shitty casino that rats are running around the place on the casino floor, on the main floor room. Like, people walk in here for the fucking parties and the balls and there's rats just running around everywhere. However, there are other parts of this segment, especially things that involve Duke's hands, that are poorly thought out. He pushes a button that's as big as his torso with his thumb, like you would a normal button as a regular sized man. Like, what? So I eventually ramp off this, ramp, and crash land, and oof a doof, I fucked myself up. So I opened a gate whilst doing my best to ignore the misogyny and navigated a jump puzzle. I managed to open the door, and it's here that I reunite with Mary Kate and Ashley, who also want to vaginally vor me.
Carry you around in my pocket like a little pet. Your hot pocket.
So Duke keeps a weapon behind glass in case of alien invasion, and the weapon is the substandard dime a dozen shotgun. What? Bear in mind, by this point I'm carrying around alien weaponry, a giant alien cannon that's the equivalent of an alien Scar rifle, and this is the gun that the game is like, yeah, this is your reward for doing all that shit. A gun that I'm pretty sure I could have actually picked up at this point. Aliens tried to ambush me, but never fear, I managed to hold them back with my shotgun and cringe combo. And as a reward for my valiant heroism, I'm treated to some incest.
Oh, you are so amazing, Duke.
Yeah, Duke, you totally beat their asses.
Oh my god. I was like so scared. Me too. I'm so glad you're okay.
Incest.
Time for my
Incest. Incest. A good thing.
Not my babes. Not in my town. You alien motherfuckers are gonna pay for this.
Oh no, the aliens stopped the incest? My heroes, I mean, how horrible. So it's during this shootout in this area that you find that the gameplay itself is fucked. I mean, I honestly think that this game might have been some form of social experiment, where the people responsible for programming Duke himself were based in one part of the country, and the people who did everything else were in another, because whoever programmed Duke got the impression that they were making a Call of Duty-esque game, and everyone else was making a traditional 90s shooter. This means that the world around Duke is expecting him to constantly be firing back, strafing, running and gunning and avoiding projectiles like Serious Sam, but Duke literally plays like Soap McTavish. The reason that this doesn't work at all is that COD and games of its ilk are designed to be realistic military shooters. And yeah, I scoff at the word realistic, but you know what I mean. You're supposed to be running around hiding behind cover and using a close-knit and littered environment to your advantage. In a wide open field surrounded by enemies, a COD protagonist will be basically fucked. And that's the issue that Duke finds himself in. He can't strafe effectively and doesn't move very fast, and he only carries 2 weapons at a time. Well, there's actually a way to fix that, but we'll get to that in a bit. Really, it's a doozy. This is one of the worst FPS games, design-wise, I've ever played. It baffles me that this wasn't picked up during QA testing, assuming that there was QA testing. I think that Randy Pitchford just uses QA testers as punching bags, but you never know. So now that I have to use myself to get the thing, Jesus, this puzzle is 8. It's not hard, but if you get it wrong, you have to fuck around with it some more, and it does my tits in to the point that they're inverted and poking out my back. We then come to a point where you have to evade trip mines by ducking and diving around them, which is totally not like an identical part in Half-Life, and anyone who says otherwise will be seriously having words with Randy Pitchford's lawyer. I also have to put out a series of fires by shooting fire extinguishers, and with an ingenious move I accidentally kill myself. So after doing all of that dumb shit again, I finally find myself in a corridor full of douchebag soldiers and angry aliens. If there is one thing that this game doesn't fall short of, it's variety. So then this bit of awkwardness plays out, and I want to take the Ratcon drug from Torchwood and erase all memories of my life to get this out of my immediate memory. I do find it funny though that this guy is meant to be the cringy character, but he just seems to act the same way as everyone else. I legit don't know what sets him apart from the fact that the game tells me that he's cringe.
Damage! You don't say cause some damage around Duke Nukem, man. You say we're gonna go bust some balls or tear shit up or something like that.
Oh, right, let's rupture some spleens together!
Why are you such a douche?
Anyway, crew from Jack and Daxter shows up and starts fucking up people's day, but I managed to kill him because I have some experience doing that. It's at this point that I reunite with my friend, the General, who I know fuck all about him, but it has been established that he's my friend, so I guess we are friends. Yay. Anyway, he informs me that the aliens have taken over the Hoover Dam and we need to stop them because this is Fallout New Vegas now. First though, we need to rescue the women because fuck these alien motherfuckers thinking that taking women entitles them to sex. We have to stop them, and then maybe we might be entitled to sex as a reward. So I arrive at the mission area and I'm introduced to Sergeant Dillon, who makes the only joke in the entire game that made me laugh. But then he keeps talking and ruins it.
I just got back from helping my friend find his wife. Christ, what a fucking pussy. Graves wants me to help you jack these motherfuckers up, just like old fucking times. Can't wait to pound them in the cornhole. Hooah!
We then encounter another attempt at a joke where Duke is offered some Master Chief armor, but power armor is for pussies. Not gonna lie, this is a sentiment that I share a lot in games as well, especially in Fallouts 3, 4 and New Vegas. Not so much in 1 and 2 though, because it's kind of like the end game of armor in that, and you kind of need to have it on all the time. But yeah, otherwise power armor is for pussies.
Let's hurry the fuck up!
We then meet Private Jenkins. Gee, I'm sure he's a real character and not a clumsy throwback to an old ass internet meme about a certain L. Jenkins. Oh, it is. All possible expectations have now been reverted. This is incredibly funny and well thought out, and whoever wrote this joke must have been a fucking genius. Ha 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 ha. Kill me, fucking kill me. I then arrive at this place where I encounter 2 cringe bags and a boss character. Finally I can put this RPG to use. Oh looky, a boss fight! So this boss, like most of the boss fights, is pretty easy, but at least this one bothers to chase you around. The bosses are acceptable enough, I guess. They're not just regular enemies with beefed up health, which was common for this time period. Only explosives seem to actually damage this guy, so it's a combined effort of using bombs and your handy dandy RPG, assuming you have it and didn't drop it like the dumb prick that I am. After killing him, we enter the Duke Dome. I'm just reading between the lines, but I'm pretty sure that this is where Duke explores his closet homosexuality. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if you notice how much he self-congratulates himself and obsesses over the idea of people thinking that he has relationships with women. One thing about this game that really appeals to me is how people worthy of respect, like firefighters, construction workers, cops, etc., all die horribly, whereas Las Vegas strippers are prioritised above all else when it comes to the rescue efforts, and are considered the pillars of society.
What the hell were you doing looking at your aunt's tits? Ain't no harm looking.
Oh, and if they aren't just dying outright, they're fucking degenerates who deserve to die like everyone else in this universe. Seriously, more incest? We need to shoot this entire writing staff before someone gets hurt. So, after they die, because of course they do, it really occurs to me that Duke is inept as a hero and constantly fails to save anyone. He saved a grand total of 1 person this entire game, and even that was optional. We then get to play with a wrecking ball, which is actually the most fun part of this entire segment, because you get to smash shit with a giant ball. It's cathartic if nothing else. Once we manage to demolish this here wall, we run up the crane's arm and get into the Duke Dome, where the most horrendous part of the game is waiting for us. So this is the Hive. The most boring, uninspired, generic alien hive you've ever seen. I'm fairly certain that Gearbox just copied and pasted this entire segment from Aliens Colonial Marines as they were making that game over the course of a fucking decade as well. This whole chapter is basically a joke. That joke, in its entirety, is ha, women got raped. And that's all it has to offer. This isn't even a funny quote-unquote joke to begin with, but the fact that it clumsily tries to make fun of such a dark topic really doesn't help at all. I'm not saying that highbrow humour is the only form that should tackle this subject. The Postal movie made a joke on this sort of thing, and honestly, it was part of the plot as well. Except there was a joke outside of rape in which the dude writes a Bible for his cult while stoned off his ass, and it involves a vertically challenged individual being raped by 1,000 monkeys. Whilst this is crass and stupid, it's too removed from reality to be offensive, and the joke within itself is that this guy wrote nonsense whilst off his tits on drugs, and now he and everyone else is having to face the consequences of what he wrote, as it all basically comes to pass as a prophecy. Meanwhile, what's the joke here? These kidnapped women get raped and impregnated with killer parasites that kill them, and Duke is such a misogynistic wanker that he is just sad that he's not allowed to legally fuck them anymore. Nothing I said there is funny, and I wouldn't even mind if it was fun, but nothing in this entire chapter is. You just trundle through Genericism the musical until you find a giant titty monster that you have to fight and kill. But the bit that annoys me the most about this Hive chapter, the bit that I find the most pitiable, is that I can't even get worked up over it. Not one bit. Honestly, 21-year-old me found a lot more distaste in this entire thing, to the point where it actually pissed me off. But now, I'm older and jaded and a lot more cynical and just generally a lot more bitter and dead inside from years of taking pills designed to make me that way, and I get nothing from this shit. It's just pathetically attempting edginess from a bunch of people who are either pervert morons or moronic perverts, and I find that I cannot even work myself up enough to pretend to care about this depravity. I've legitimately been dreading refacing this shit for years, and now that I'm looking at it, I got nothing. This whole thing is a complete mess that's beneath me. In terms of the rest of it, this is the least varied, least fun, and least interesting portion of the game. It's just a dark and depressing shithole that you have to work your way through. It's actually a lot harder on the PS3 from what I remember, or maybe I was just worse at games back then, I don't know. Anyway, even in the context of the game, it's the chapter with the least interactables, and every part of it looks the exact same. The only saving grace is the fact that it's probably the shortest act in the entire game. Anyway, I eventually find the Olsen twins who are being kidnapped and raped by aliens. That's the sentence I just said. Anyway, despite being raped and eaten alive from the inside out, they at least went out serving their only purpose of filleting Duke's ego. Doesn't help either that Duke just doesn't have a shred of empathy for anyone in this entire situation. It also just removes from any stakes that this game might have had, because Duke is too intellectually stunted to care about anyone around him. He's a literal narcissist. It'd work if he was like Caleb from Blood, but this guy's meant to be like a hero of some sort, and the game constantly tells you how great he is, and he has absolutely no positive traits. He still subscribes to the old school thing of, you're a badass if you don't care about anyone and treat everyone like shit mentality. Anyway, after suffering that bullshit, I made it to the big titty monster. I mean,
a queen!
This involves throwing things onto a trampoline that bounces off and hit her and blow up. It's a so-so fight. I appreciate its scale and the fact that it requires you to work out a strategy to defeat it, but it's not especially difficult or fun to do any of this shit. It also really looks like a knockoff of Alien, because this game has no imagination. Also, don't say this is a parody or satire, it's nothing of the sort. It just wants you to say that so it has a hollow excuse to be shit. Anyway, you eventually have to run up to rip its tongue out. This kills it? I know there's an artery in the tongue that could potentially cause it to bleed out and die, but I refuse to believe that the people that made this game are smart enough to know that. After killing Mommy Dearest, the roof blows open and I'm saved by this jackass who airlifts me to safety, and thus begins the most pointless part of Duke Nukem Forever. A dream sequence in which you have to find a dildo. No, I'm not kidding, this entire sequence involves Duke wandering around trying to find a dildo. In most competent games, well, in most competent games this wouldn't be a thing, but in most competent games, this would be the beginning of a sequencer where Duke ends up exploring his inner conscience or something, but this isn't a competent game. and such a thing would be nigh impossible as Duke has no character. Why any of this is necessary is completely beyond me. Took me about half an hour to find the dildo. The game was starting to feel like Dark Ninja Simulator at this point, but in the end I found it in a locker. So the payoff for this pointless bullshit? I wake up in a helicopter, and I never got to score with the generic woman who looks like she was bought off a Unity asset store. Oh no. So confession time. I lost about half an hour's worth of footage here. And yes, that's completely unprofessional. And yes, I'm a bad person. I'm worse than Hitler and I'm going to hell. But in all honesty, I don't feel like much was lost. I was just having to climb up this pointless building skeleton and I made it to a giant burger place. I asked myself if I wanted to redo this segment again after beating this snooze fest. The answer was basically no. So at some point I got shrunk again, because that shit isn't annoying. And now I'm having to hop around a kitchen and try and save this lady from electrified water. I kinda like how creative this segment is. It's a nice bit of puzzle platforming in a shooter that you just don't get nowadays. Anyway, I make it to the roof where I find a dead scientist and he has some sort of shrink ray. I do love these kind of weapons because I spend the rest of the game avoiding them. Like, why not just use a bullet? From this point onwards I have to do some wave-based defensive gameplay and I kinda dig this, it's not too bad of a thing. It didn't exactly make me moist, but I had to fend for my own and got a holographic Duke to use as a decoy, so that I didn't have to do all of the heavy lifting. I find this to be one of the more tolerable segments. We then graduate from that to a turret section, as if to convince us, no, really, life is not worth living. At least the turret that you use isn't half bad. Most of it is fish in a barrel gameplay, which isn't too frustrating because it's easy, but it's pointless for the same reason. We then get to go to the truly pointless section. This long ass vehicle section which involves you driving around a mid-2000s looking Dust Bowl map in a truck designed by a 10-year-old, stopping to look for gasoline every 30 seconds like you're suddenly playing Left 4 Dead 2. You can't even bring spare jerry cans along for the ride and plan ahead any because that would make the game too fucking easy. So being smart is out as a thing. You might notice that I've been going in broad strokes for a fair bit now, and that's because this game is more padded than a disappointing hookup. Also, I do owe a public apology to Crush Hour for ever criticising its driving, because the game's driving makes this game look like God tier. At least in that game you don't fall over every 30 seconds and miss easily doable jumps. I think my favourite thing about this segment is how someone at 3D Realms decided to hold it up side by side with Red Dead Redemption 1 and say, ha, look how much better this shit is. To which nobody fucking agreed. The fact that they held this up next to a cleverly written, unique, fun western game that is idolised to this day just shows how lacking they were in self-awareness during development. Nothing about this looks good. It's like showing off your genital warts on your dating profile as your best feature. It's a mistake that never really goes down well. If personal experience has taught me anything, never ever do that. What's kind of sad is that the genital warts of this game are kind of its best feature. Then there's this bit with a minecart, which is also kinda shit, but a bit better than the shitty road trip segment. One thing that does interest me about this segment is that they had a Stinky Pete-like character who just sort of existed during development. His name was apparently Gus, and he doesn't appear at all in the finished game, but was featured in a modded spiritual successor that came out in 2013. Speaking of this game's development, did you know that this was almost published by GT Interactive Software, who are a digital branch of Good Times? Yet this was almost published by the people who gave us our favourite version of Beauty and the Beast. How tragic is it that we don't live in the universe where that happened? This mining cart segment is at least kinda fun, kinda, sorta. I mean, in any other game probably would have been forgotten about, but in this game it's the highlight. Which probably says everything about this game. We eventually get a longer roller coaster ride on a minecart, which is the most fun thing in the entire game. And it's fucking shit.
Cruel world, must I go on? Cruel, cruel,
Now, the game never truly rips off the Half-Life games in an obvious fashion, but I'd place a bet that Half-Life 1 and 2 influenced a fair bit of this part of the game. The portal coming out of Hoover Dam resembles the portal from Half-Life 2 Episode 2 a great deal, and there's a tower that gives me Citadel vibes. The level design often feels like it reflects Half-Life 1 when it actually wants to be decent. Eventually I managed to kill my arch nemesis, this stupid fucking car, and I've never been happier. We then find El Presidente waiting for us alongside Ant and Dec from Prison Break, and he gives us a real bollocking. And he's delusional. And he's some sort of reptilian infiltrator.
All of this is your fault. You did this. You! Now I've got to go find him and try to repair the negotiations you ruined. I told you not to get involved.
Mr. President, we need to leave now.
This isn't over, Duke.
We then reunite with Captain Dillon again, who's decided that we've gone too long without someone saying something that makes me want to vomit into my trousers. So thanks for that, Dillhole.
Took you so long, but I know of some sexy thing with 3 titties. Yeah!
We then have a shootout on top of the Hoover Dam, which is clearly a rip-off of Fallout New Vegas. They clearly went back in time after the game came out to 1997, and based this whole game around Hoover Dam to rip off that game. It couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Then a boss happens, who is a worthy rival even if he does take the piss a wee bit. You have to kick the shit out of him and disable each of his eyes as you go. You might wonder why you can't just do all 3 at once and get it over with. Well, there is actually a reason as to why that's not a viable tactic, which is because I break into the Hoover Dam and find that I'm just in time to save this guy from having to do his job. I don't blame the guy for having no confidence, because everyone but me seems to exist to be killed so that I look good. So I harboured a tiny bit of respect for this dickhead. They tried to convince me to use the freeze ray, but like the shrink ray, the Viagra ray and the dodgy chimichanga ray, it merely overcomplicates the process of killing people rather than just, you know, fucking killing people. How about one of them Dalek rubber ray Tommy guns? That'd be fucking sick, and more useful. I mean, if we can have Master Chief's armour in this turd, we might as well have a useful prop from another sci-fi series. I have to admit, the dialogue that initiates when you pick up the freeze ray did make me crack up a little.
Duke, you take the freeze ray. I'm sure you'll be better with it than me anyway, right?
Be careful with that thing. Last time Lawrence used it, he lost a pinky. Real dangerous. Could hurt somebody good.
Why didn't you tell me that before? Now I look like an ass in front of Duke Nukem.
The way that the special weapons work and their introductions is another thing that's really reminiscent of Half-Life. Oh, and speaking of the special weapons, surprise! The freeze ray shit! Thankfully I find a real man's weapon and this segment becomes a lot more doable. This whole segment is very reminiscent of Half-Life's questionable ethics chapter, along with a few other chapters. Admittedly, Gearbox did have a hand in Half-Life Opposing Force and the expansion pack to the original Half-Life, so this could just be a case of them playing to what they know, or maybe even homage, but I genuinely get the impression that they're ripping shit off. I mean, given how unoriginal most of the humour is, would you be amazed if the game design itself was just ripping something else off? I then encounter whatever the shit these things are, and I'm able to get them to fuck off by opening a valve nearby, which steams them to death. This gives us a boring version of Pipe Dream to get intimate with for the next 10 or 20 minutes. Yay! This is just what you want in your epic game. Puzzles that break up the third act, ruining any momentum that you might have been building up. Anyway, this puzzle's annoying, so it can fuck off. There's a clever reference to Valve in here, and by clever, I mean it's obvious and lazy.
I hate Valve puzzles.
I then make a new friend in this adorable wickle wat. Aw, look at his little whiskers. Aww. I was hoping he'd be my new friend and we'd accomplish great things together, but as soon as I shrank he ordered his posse to attack me. It just goes to show that some friends only respect you for as long as you're a big guy, and if you shrink around them and show weakness they'll turn on you. Ungrateful twats. Duke then unscrews the vent screws with his bare hands, which even if you were tiny enough to be able to hold them, I don't think you'd be able to do that. Pretty sure you'd need a tool given how tightly screwed in they'd be. Also, fairly certain that the screw would be the opposite way around as well, making this entire thing impossible. But then again, I've never been shrunk and had to unscrew a vent to get around before, so maybe I should shut up. It's after another cringe one-liner that I notice a major flaw in Duke's character, and that's that he's just the worst kind of cringe. Timesplitter's Future Perfect did all of this tons better in 2005 with Sergeant Cortez. He was quite similar to Duke in a number of ways. One-liner spewing, slightly egotistical ladies man, dumb as a bag of hammers, and very, very cringe at times.
Yeah! Time to split!
I'll get the next one.
But the charm in his character is that he is A, invested in the situation that is currently happening, so we care if he makes it or not, and B, his stupidity and cringy behaviour is actually recognised by the world around him, and people react to it accordingly. He occasionally gets praised, but only when it's actually deserved, and I appreciate that a lot more. Also, C, he's actually quite charming in his own way. He's a big lovable idiot who's trying to save the universe, and he only occasionally fucks up, and in all fairness, a fair few of the events where he fucks up are genuine mistakes.
Hold it right there, Crow. Hand them over.
Hey, hand what over?
The time device. The crystals.
What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb with me, Crow. I know everything. I know you used the time device to travel back to 1994 and tell your younger self to carry on your twisted genetic experiments using the power of the time crystals.
Really? Really?
Well, yeah.
And exactly where do I get this time device? Don't be alarmed. It's me, your younger self. I've come from the past to give you this time device. You must take it and... I think I know the rest. Well, okay then. It's the red button. Ta-ta! I'm off to live forever!
Damn it! Spaceman! Oh yeah.
And D, this game isn't constantly telling me to like him. If that game could get it right in 2005, why can't this one 6 years later? The game has Sex in the City syndrome, where no bad things can be said or done about Duke, and nothing bad can happen to Duke without him shrugging it off or laughing it off. If the greatest justification that anyone has for that is, well, it's a comedy, well, it's not funny. Watching someone have their ego stroke for 7 hours is not my idea of a laugh. In fact, the opposite is more true. Duke never meets a woman who isn't impressed by him, and if he did, I'm pretty sure it would be played off to insist that she is the problem and not Duke. I do kind of like that there are regular sized enemies as a boss battle when you're shrunk. It's honestly kind of creative using what they have. I mean, the bullets must be as big as the tip of a thumbtack. Could that even do the kind of damage that it does in the game? Especially against a hide as scaly as this guy's? I assume not, but I'm not a doctor and I'm certainly not a reptilian doctor, so... I then get outside at last where the portal and the rest of this crazy shit is happening. At least this is somewhat stimulating. There's a weird pylon puzzle that's reminiscent of something from Half-Life, only this one is with an electrical current. Whilst this makes a lot of sense given that it's actually passing through the electrical railing of the walkway, which would in turn make this entire walkway electrified, but no, apparently electricity only works on concrete and people, it doesn't work on metal, silly me. It also leaves a scorch mark on the concrete, which is another thing I don't think would happen. But again, I'm not a fucking physicist, so, you know, if anybody knows otherwise, you're more than welcome to tell me. But admittedly, I don't care that much. Then you have to fight a bunch of these things at the base of Hoover Dam. They're alright enemies, a bit more varied than your usual cannon fodder trash, but I'm not the most impressed by them. We get a sequence here that really shows that this game wanted to be Half-Life. Like it really did. When it grows up, it's going to be a big boy like that game. The next bit is a puzzle involving forklifts, which sounds fun until you remember that this is Duke Nukem Forever, where fun goes to die. Well, at least the forklift controls better than Duke does. You know, since it drives like an actual forklift. We then arrive at a generator room. By this point, you're kinda hoping to get to the end. I mean, this thing is just going on and on and on, and there's no good reason for it besides, it just has to, I guess. I then reunite with General Warts. I don't know what his name is. Anyway, we end up with some weird hentai land, where Edge is probably making the Happy PP commercial or something off screen. I really don't get what the fuck any of this is, but okay. We then meet this nice fella who operates this crane device. He will help us on our journey through hentai land. You might think that this man having a real job and being a real human will prove fatal, but fear not, my friends, because he will not perish, for which I am glad. The game then becomes a little bit like a rail shooter, and you have to go along and shoot things whilst moving very, very slowly. It ends with a boss fight, and whilst it's far from the worst thing in the world, it's about as stimulating as being in Eleven's tank from Stranger Things. I eventually run into a fan that I need to throw these giant toolboxes into to make it stop. This is the most satisfying thing in the entire game. I also like how Duke makes an impression of the machine malfunctioning, it's pretty relatable. But then Duke brings up a picture on a computer that looks like a 14-year-old boy would look it up instead of porn. Okay, so about 5.5 hours into the playthrough, I discover this craziness. Apparently, you can carry more than 2 weapons at a time in Duke Nukem Forever. You know how I said this plays like a Call of Duty game? Well, part of that was limiting the weapon capacity to 2 guns. Well, apparently, you can carry 2 more guns, but in order to do that, you have to go to the game's options and enable this feature. They never tell you this, you're just supposed to fucking guess. I've never played a game before where something like this is hidden under a series of options in the options menu. I've seen games where you had to unlock more slots, but never have I ever had to go rooting around in the options to find something that should have just been immediately accessible. Like, what the actual fuck? So I emerge from under the water to find that this Cyclops bastard is fucking things up for everyone. By the way, RIP middle manager Manfred. And then there's a Wilhelm scream because of Corsairs. One thing that's pretty lame about this game is how the stakes don't feel like they're ramping up in the final act. Zapper, Dog's Life, Desperate Housewives, Fairy Tales, Sonic Forces, Postal 2, The Unknown City, Michonne, Pilgrim's Progress, Area 51, Red Faction 2, The Sniper 2, Revolution 60, Bug's Life Active Play, Shiver, Brink, and WWE Crush Hour. Whether they were good games or not, they all had a final act that at least felt like the final level, that added some form of fucking gravity to the game to make the ending somewhat exciting. They at least tried to make the game look a bit more intense towards the end, giving you more of an experience, but this 14-year long awaited epic? Oh, you just run around this boring concrete tomb for hours fighting the same shit you've been fighting the whole game. Why wasn't the Hive the final chapter? It's at least foreboding. It at least looks like some sort of Lovecraftian horror. A boring one, but a Lovecraftian horror nonetheless. Hoover Dam is a fucking boring place to be. And yes, Fallout New Vegas uses it as a final point, but they did much better of a job of it. Also, that final quest isn't even half as long as this portion of the game. I can handle Hoover Dam for half an hour. 2 or 3 hours is too fucking much. Honestly, this is on par with a fucking sewer level in how boring and shitty it is. We then encounter this story's true hero. This weird office worker on warehouse machinery who's driving like a madman from hostile aliens. Why wasn't this game about him? Anyway, after a boring physics puzzle on horse tranks, I move on to the next boring bit. So, then another working class man gets culled.
Oh god! Oh god! They're everywhere! You gotta help me! Please save me! Oh!
I reunite with Private Dylan, who's hurt and useless. Hoorah! So, after a very Half-Life-like puzzle, I find him and he's bleeding to death. And he dies. I'm heartbroken. Truly heartbroken. I can't really express it because, you know, my meds. It's not my lack of giving a shit. Really, guys. It's funny because I give more of a shit about it than Duke, who just makes a comment about him not being in the sequel now. This guy was like your friend or something. Shouldn't you care more? Anyway, I keep dying after this bit, after the first time. And I just walk away on him as he's trying to say his final words, and I leave him to die alone every time. I find it kind of funny in a weird way. So I'm just going to fast forward through this boring we want to be Half-Life but cannot be fucked bit to the point that I fight the Hydra monster. It's not a terrible boss battle, and this one is one of the better moments during the final act. Then I move on to the next area, which I believe is the last area of the game. No, it's not. Shit. I'm not gonna lie, I'm really struggling to watch this footage back to myself because of how fucking boring this game is. It utterly lacks in stimulation. You're too buff and tough to feel vulnerable, but you never quite feel like you're king of the world, like you would in an old school FPS. This wants to be both at the same time, and that's why it fails. I'd rather be Doom Guy descending into hell with guns blazing than Duke Nukem cautiously edging my way through areas fighting small scale fights every now and then. There's few fights that feel like all hell is breaking loose, and you don't get much of a fun kill streak or any sort of flow. In this part of the game you have to fight your way through a bunch of enemies so that you can escape an exploding dam. It's kinda like that bit in Uncharted where you have to escape the sinking ship. It sounds fun, but then you remember that this is DNF and realise that this is about as fun and exciting as baking foil. Yeah, then go to the final area where Duke swims his way up an S-bend and gets pulled out by this random jackass. Not sure why this guy couldn't be Dylan, why it had to be Dylan who died down there in the story, but whatever. So then Duke gets his wish of being kissed by a man without it being gay as he's brought back to life through CPR. It's also funny that this is the only kiss that Duke gets in the entire game as well. Regardless of how you look at it, for a ladies' man this is kinda sad. Also, not sure what this soldier medic dude was doing with Duke's personal M1911, but I'm glad that he has one, or a replica of one. It's at this point that President Reptgun gets mad for some reason. I'd say that he's a parody of the one disapproving jackass in every action movie or video game ever made, but he's not a parody, he's just straight up that. He then opts to nuke the dam for some reason, with Duke still in it. Don't know why Duke didn't just take the chopper. I mean, I fight guys who are like 30 feet tall and fire rockets. Pretty sure I can beat up Ant and Dec here along with Ronald Reagan's scaly-ass brother. Anyway, then the Cycloid Emperor shows up and murders Ant and Dec and El Presidente. Tears were shed or something. But then CPR Cecil dies, and now we've lost our only love interest, and the only character left with any form of depth. A true fucking tragedy. Cycloid Emperor is a really easy fight. You just kite around it and fire rockets whenever you get the chance. You get more rockets when Pigface spawns with one. It's actually somehow easier than the fight with the Emperor that you had at the start of the game. The one true twist is that you have to beat him 3 times to damage him in 3 different ways, so that you can eventually perma-kill him. It probably sounds monotonous and annoying, especially given that ripping his arm out doesn't change how the fight works at all, and it's not like there are phases or anything in the fight of that nature that makes it more varied or interesting. But it's not monotonous and annoying, because reasons. Maybe it's just me, but the final boss being the Cycloid Emperor seems kinda dull. Like, couldn't they have upped the stakes? Maybe have had it so that you fight the Cycloid god or something of that nature? Not only have we seen the Emperor before, but he doesn't look especially impressive. He looks like everything we've ever fought. Literally all of these aliens are just big clumsy beasts. Anyway, I rip his neck tube out, which does something. I don't know, be worthwhile knowing what these tubes even do. I mean, for all I know, I'm just fucking up his armor's air conditioning unit and making him feel a bit warm. He then collapses and his eye falls out, prompting Duke to piss into his vacant eye socket as he promised at the start of the fight. Which is a little funny, I'll give it that. You then run away, jump up and grab the General's hand as the airlifts you to safety. A nuke goes off in a really lame reenactment of that bit from Modern Warfare, but without any of the gravitas. A Duke says that it's a lame ending, but it is the lame ending. It's not like he's saying what a lame ending and then reverses time to make it a better ending. Better to just acknowledge that you're shit and end it there so that the staff can go home early. Also, this wasn't the ending of Modern Warfare 1, this was the end of Act 1. Modern Warfare 1 had a real ending, unlike this game.
What kind of shit ending is that? I ain't dead. I'm coming back for more.
There is a post-credit scene where Duke miraculously survives the nuclear bomb that destroyed the whole of Vegas, but left him unscathed somehow. Like, there's no attempt at an explanation, he just turns up at a press conference where he announces that he's running for president. I have no fucking clue why he does this. At no point does he suggest that this is on his mind or that this is what he wants to end up doing. There is absolutely nothing foreshadowing this at all. It just comes out of nowhere. And thus this concludes the origin of the Trump for President campaign, and we all know the rest. That abomination was Duke Nukem Forever, and it's one of the least enjoyable shitty games I've personally ever put myself through. It attempts to achieve so little and somehow fails at the few things that it sets out to do. The game is overly long, and yet fuck all happens in it. The plot is barely existent, there are no characters, there are just a few if any jokes that aren't just mindless bleatings of the socially inept, memes and references, and the worst part about the whole thing is that the game has a massive chubby for itself when it honestly shouldn't, because it's well and truly AIDS burnt onto a Blu-ray. Nothing about this game is worth suffering for. Absolutely nothing. Some people say that my opinions on this game are my entire opinions on Duke Nukem as a franchise, but no, rest assured I don't really feel that this represents Duke Nukem as a franchise. It very well could, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt and assume that it just doesn't. Because I refuse to believe that Duke Nukem 3D was this fucking awful and well received at the same time. I feel like this is most likely the Rayman Raving Rabbids of Duke Nukem games. I'd like to say that this is the end of me talking about Duke Nukem Forever, but sadly it isn't, as there is, I shit you not, more content. Yes, they released a fucking DLC campaign for this. And you know what's even crazier than a DLC for a game that literally nobody liked, coming out nearly a year after nobody liked the original game? The fact that it's better than the original game. No joke, it's actually a much more enjoyable experience. So, as much as I'd love to torture myself with some Phoenix games in order to cleanse my palate, I'm gonna have to dive headfirst back into the big pile of shit that is Duke Nukem Forever, with Duke Nukem Forever, the Doctor Who cloned me. I wish real Doctor Who would show up and fucking save me from this shit.
Welche neugierige Babbrüchen.